Okay. Well, like I said, welcome everybody to this October meeting of the Minds session. This week we are really excited to present Jim Duffield and Pete Lowe, and they're going to speak about the exchange and the Orcas Recycling Service. In 1981, a group of community activists created the Orcas Island legendary reuse center, the exchange. These visionaries created a system to reduce, reuse, and recycle before the phase even existed. In 2011, San Juan County announced they wanted to stop managing solid waste, fearful that the big garbage corporation would take over the Orcas Transfer Station and evict the exchange. The board of directors decided to respond to the community's request for proposals. And this is what brings us to our present place in the community is the Orcas Recycle Center and the exchange. And I'm going to turn it over to Pete and Jim and take it away.
Thanks, Jim.
And also, I'd like everybody to mute their during their presentation to please be muted. And then if you have any questions at the end, you can.
What's your name? I don't see your name on there.
I'm Jim Glozier. I'm under Orcas Senior Center.
You ready?
Yes, go ahead. Take it away.
Okay, that's fine. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Jim Duffield. I go by Duff after you get to know me. And Pete Moe, I'm the president of the board of directors. I have been for 2 years and about 6 years on the board. Pete has been our executive director for what, 8 years, Pete? Something like that?
Since 2013. You do the math.
Well, that was pretty good then. So I was telling folks that came on early that this is not a polished presentation. So we're going to do what we like to do, which is talk about the organization that we work with and try to give you some information that might go beyond what's available on the website. And I will be showing you some stuff on the website. So, and as it turns out, we have George Post in there. George, wave so if people see who you are. And George has a unique knowledge of the exchange because he started it. So I would ask that you save your questions until the end. Pete and I have said we'll take about 45 minutes of the hour and then we'll keep 15 minutes at the end for questions. So if we could do that. Any questions before I get started? Okay. So this was advertised as past, present, and future, and Pete can talk about the past better than I. A lot of the information you're going to get is on our website. Let me see if I can bring that up here so I can show you what it looks like if you've never been to our website. Okay, so you should be looking at a colorful page called the Exchange Orcas Recycling Services website. And if you go in there and look around, you'll find that, for example, under About, it will talk about how the exchange came to be.
You're not sharing.
I'm not sharing?
Oh.
Oh, thank you. Hang on a second. Let me find my way down here. All right, let me hang on a second. Let me back out of that. It worked before. Let's see here. That's not the one I want.
There you go. No, you're good now.
Yeah, I know, but I got to find I'm trying to find my page. I don't see it.
Go down to Safari.
Say it again.
Go to Safari.
All right.
Open it.
Yeah, I was there. I had it on before.
Oh.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let me, rather than fiddle with that, let me go back to where you all are. And let's do this. I'm going to stop sharing for right now. Sorry, I had it on there. I couldn't bring it up. Anyway, I'll go find my page while Pete tells you a little bit more about how the exchange and then Orcas Recycling Services got started, and then he can segue from that into some of the stuff that's going on at present. Pete, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Pete Moe. About half of you were involved. Sadie was involved. Of course, George was involved back in the old days, and when we took over. But those of you who remember the old exchange in the woods, that started somewhere around 80, 81 with George and I think a couple other people helping him. And it was a institution, became an institution. It was one of my favorite things to visit when I didn't live on Orcas yet, back in the 90s. But I always made time to stop by the exchange. When I did move here in 2005, I actually came to be the director of the Fun House, and then got to know George and started volunteering and ended up on the board of the exchange with George and just a couple other people, Ollie Lum and John Clancy, and can't remember who else, but that was about it. And so we kind of had the old school exchange going for a number of years. And then in 2012 or 11 even, the county started talking about getting out of the garbage business. They didn't want to operate the transfer station anymore. The big tipping floor and the recycling Z-wall and all that stuff. So they were going to, put a request for proposals out, and they did. And we were pretty certain that if a big company like a waste management or trucking company came in and took over the transfer station, they probably would not look kindly upon the exchange as it existed. So we decided to respond to the request for proposal, and then an extremely long story short, we ended up prevailing and getting a contract to operate the transfer station. And I know George and Sadie remember a lot of that because you were both super big parts of it. We got the contract in 2013, and very shortly thereafter, the exchange had a fire and essentially burned to the ground. It was a very difficult period for us because here we were, the exchange, now running a transfer station, but there was no exchange. It was gone. So we picked up the pieces, literally, cleaned up the site, and started the process of raising funds to build a new exchange. Another long story short, we opened the doors of the building I'm sitting in right now on Thanksgiving 2017. So that's what got us here. Meanwhile, learning how to run the transfer station and the recycling side of the transfer station. And we've learned a lot, and I think we've done a really good job and turned what was a money losing operation for the county into a profitable operation, running it as a nonprofit. And the exchange, we never knew if the exchange with the new building, with full-time, full and part-time employees, and everything would make money or lose money. It's made a little money. It basically breaks even, but it's made a little bit of money every year. So it's things are going well. Exchange is kind of running itself. I'm sitting in a kind of exciting new part of the exchange, which is upstairs in the building. We now have a gallery for higher end items that are donated, and this is open by appointment only. I think we were talking about having an event for senior center, having a tour, and you guys could come up and check this out. There's the looking over the edge to the lower exchange, but also to come by and check out some of the new stuff we have. Our biggest new thing is we just assembled and tested last week our new glass crushing equipment. So starting November 1st, we're going to accept glass as a separate item up on the Z-wall. So if you bring in your recycling, we're hoping you'll bring in your glass separate, along with your cardboard separate. We've already been accepting that for some time. Aluminum cans separately. And all that is part of a plan, a master plan to go back to separated recyclables. Any of you have been here longer than me everything used to be separated at the Z-Wall. I remember that from being a visitor, but when I lived here. So it was pre-2005 for sure. But mixing all the recycling together, what we call commingled recycling, is very inefficient. It's very full of contamination. And when China stopped taking recycling from the United States in 2018, which you probably have heard about, it created a massive problem here in this country with recycling that had nowhere to go. And especially the quality of material we were sending to China, because China for years, decades, was accepting really highly contaminated, awful material. And the US, we just got lazy. And so we forgot how to do it. And so now the commingled system is really kind of a disaster. So we're going back to separation, which is far better, far more efficient. And I'll talk about that more in a slideshow that I'm going to do later. But so we're just excited about the glass crusher right now. We're in the process of designing a baler facility. So we're going to build another building here on site, just north of the exchange building. So between the old landfill and the exchange, that's going to have a industrial scale horizontal baler. So we will be able to bale materials like cardboard, aluminum, steel, plastic on site. And then we will be shipping bales off the island, which is so much more efficient, as you can imagine, because of the compaction. So we probably take, one truckload can take 4 times the amount of uncrushed cardboard that we're shipping off now. So it's really a big deal for climate as well, because we're going to be really reducing the amount of carbon, the amount of trucks.
Hey, Pete,
going on the ferry.
excuse me, could you what's the financial impact of sending one truck off versus 4? Like, for example, what's it cost us to send a truck off with Orcas freight?
So when we send a 40, I'm going to go into this a little later too in the slideshow, but
Okay.
40-yard boxes full of cardboard loose costs us about $800 to take to the mainland. And we probably get about $50 for the cardboard. Whereas we'll probably, like I said, 4 times as much cardboard when it's crushed into a bale for the same trip. So we'll get 25% shipping cost, and we'll get 4 times as much return. There's one thing that I do want people to realize is that when we start baling and when we send recyclables to the mainland and get money for them, it's usually pennies on the dollar compared to the cost of shipping it off. So really all this stuff, it's great for the environment. We're not getting rich off it though. What we're doing is we're kind of losing less money on recycling by doing that, but it does make it more efficient in every different possible way. So Duff, does that get us to the present?
Yeah, let me ask you, since you talked about the gallery, how did the gallery get started? Why don't you talk about that?
It got started because of a massive donation of artwork that we got a couple of years ago. Ralph and Terrell Kaplan, who some of you may know, they lived in Rosario, and Ralph was an insane art collector. He passed away, unsurprisingly, and Terrell decided to move to Arizona to be closer to her kids. And they, of course, suddenly their kids had a really big house in Rosario full of literally over 1,000 pieces of art of all varying values, from $10 items to $100,000 items. So we worked closely with the family to help them first donate a lot of the most valuable pieces to the Burke Museum, because Ralph collected modern Native American art mostly. A lot of it went to the Burke Museum. The family kept, of course, some stuff. Then we helped them auction some items, and then they kind of gave us everything was left over. But at one point, our list of items from the Kaplan family that we were taking in as a donation was like 380 pieces, and that didn't count the silverware from the kitchen and the coffee maker and everything else in their place. So we had so much art that we decided to use a space, this space upstairs that I'm in, to show some of it, and also do right by the family and try to get, you know, a reasonable amount of money for some of these items. We didn't want it all to go down into the exchange store where people can pay what they want. So that's what happened. And then since then, we've continued to get really nice high-end items that we've been putting up here. So actually the Kaplan stuff, much of it's gone at this point, but we continue to get really nice stuff that our manager, Jeff Ludwig, curates. And so this is a cool thing. So I hope to get you guys up here if you haven't
Yeah,
been.
thanks. I'm impressed by how much new artwork is up there. Okay, let me give you a break for a second. I wanted to show you. Can you see this now? Is that being shared? Hang on. Now,
Yes.
that's being shared?
Yeah.
Okay, for all of you, this is what our current website looks like, and it's at exchangeorcas.org, not com, but .org. And you can find out pretty much anything you'd want to know on here. You can see there's a bunch of headings here about home, the exchange, recycling, garbage, hazardous waste, prices, about, and on the online store. A couple things that I wanted to tell you. First of all, and Pete can talk a little bit more about this, probably after the first of the year, we will have a new website that will have a lot of the information, the same information, but it'll be displayed, we hope, better. But I wanted to go here under about, come on. And so this, who we are, is a lot of what we were just talking about how the organization came to be. So if you want to read up on that, you can. I wanted to show you who is on our board. We currently have 10 members of the board, and I'll just scroll down through here so you can see who some of these people are. I moved out here, my wife and I moved out here 7 years ago from Mount Vernon. I had been on the board with the Habitat for Humanity there, and was one of the people that got the Habitat for Humanity store started in Mount Vernon. And they're just doing gangbusters. They are going to go over $1 million in sales this year. Just amazing. And they're basically doing the same thing we're doing out here. Mark Mayer, some of you may know, is a cabinet maker. He kind of gotten back into the business with his son recently. He's our vice president. He's coming off the board at the end of this year. We'll miss him. Kate Hansen, a local woman, is our treasurer. And she's a really good sport because she didn't have any treasurer background, but we needed a treasurer, and she said she'd tackle it. Good worker. And then there's Pete, and you can read about his background. He's been back and forth between the East Coast and the West Coast in his life. Toby Cooper had been on the was it Friends board as the vice president, I believe it was. That's one of his jobs he's had. Marta Nielsen, a lot of you know, she runs the Rainbow Chicken Ranch that you go by on your way to the ferry. Asifa Payson works at, shoot, help me out, Pete. Creative, I can't think of the name.
Lotion Crafters.
Lotion Crafter, that's right. Sorry, my phone's ringing in the background. Hang on, I gotta get my wife to take it. Hang on.
Asif is the late Tom Welch's daughter-in-law.
Thanks. My wife and I are leaving on a 12-day trip tomorrow. That's our dog sitter coming out to on the ferry, just calling us. Eric Morris is best known probably because of the Earth Ball things that you'll see in the parades around here. Jared Lovejoy, the Orcas Film Festival is probably the thing he's best known for locally. Nancy Schaefer is our newest member of the board, and has had 30 plus years in recycling. A lot of it started when she lived in Eugene. The only person who's not listed here is, he and I are joking about not getting his picture up here, and that's Larry Coddington. And perhaps some of you know him. Larry had been involved in some sort of a building affordable housing project that was done here on the island a few years back. Good guy, equipment operator, got a heart of gold. Anyway, we have a good board. I feel comfortable that we're doing good things. We didn't talk about our mission. So again, this is here too, if you want to see what it is, but basically building a zero waste community through service, education, and stewardship of our waste/resource streams. And we believe that we're going to be adding in the new year something to that about climate change. Something I'll cover here under if you should want to volunteer. We thought that we were going to have need for a lot of volunteers at the exchange when we first got started. And we did have a lot of volunteers. And then when COVID hit, we kind of cut back on that. And Jeff Ludwig has a team of about, I think it's 11 employees that work from 1 day to 4 days a week. And we really don't have need for volunteers in the exchange, but we do have need for volunteers from time to time. And one that I would ask you to consider doing next year when the weather gets a little bit better is we've started a program of what we're calling docents that work at the Z-Wall. The Z-Wall is where the recycling takes place. That's where you pull up and you dump off your cardboard or your aluminum cans or whatever. And we have volunteers that the last 2 years during the nicer weather, not when it's wintertime, that'll come up there and they have an orange vest on and they identify themselves as a docent, a volunteer docent. And their whole job is not to be the recycle police, but rather to be a resource for people who are not sure, does this go in here or should I put this in trash, or is my cardboard the way it's supposed to be, or whatever. And it actually is a really good service because a lot of people just are not sure. Pete calls it, was it aspirational recycling? When people say, gee, I think it should go in here, and it goes into commingled recycling. And Pete already had talked about how that's not a very efficient way to recycle. So the docents work a 2-hour shift at their choosing, and they help people understand how to recycle correctly. And they can also pass on information such as, this is what's coming down the road, such as when the glass crusher is going to be operational. And then if you wanted to sign up for our newsletter, I'm not sure what the number is, Pete, you probably have a better idea than I, but I want to say it's 600 to 700 people currently get our newsletter once a month. And it's a simple way, it's free, and it's a simple way to keep up with what's going on. It basically has a lot of the information that's on the homepage of the newsletter. Let me go back to that. So for example, if you wanted to know about the Great Islands cleanup, that's in here. And over here, you can see we're starting to accept glass, separated glass on the 1st of November. And I believe that we're going to have a good turnout on that. This glass recycling one over here is a video that my wife shot of me trying to explain to people in 8 minutes what the current situation is on recycling and where we're going to go, including the baler coming up. And if you happen to watch that video, I think there's one down below here. Down here, if you watch this recycling tutorial, that's the video that I'm talking about. And at the end of it, it tells you how you can contact me, and then you can get a free plastic tote that's of a size that you can fill it full of glass and still lift it. And we've already handed out, I just went out today to get some more ready, but Pete, I think 130 totes that are out in the community already, and they're free. So it's a real convenient way to separate your glass safely and bring it in to be recycled. So the glass crusher is exciting. We talked about that. Let me take this off. See if I can do this right. Yeah, that's not what I wanted there.
Open your Zoom.
Yeah. Say it again.
Just click on the Zoom icon in the bottom.
Okay. Now I'm trying to get, it's okay. I'm tell you what, let me just
You're trying to
talk about
stop
this.
screen sharing, right? You need to stop.
I can stop sharing, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, there we go.
There you go.
The glass crusher, as we said, has been put together. I was out there last Thursday when we ran it. It was actually really cool. I thought it was going to be really noisy. It isn't. We've talked with Jim Glozier about setting up a tour for anybody from the senior center that would like to come by and see the machine in operation, have a chance to understand how it works. And I think what's really impressive is, as Pete said, we had 3 good-sized totes or containers that we ran through the machine, and we wound up with about 1/5 or 1/6 of that volume. And it feels like sand. It really does. There's no sharp edges to it. It's really cool stuff. And it will stay on the island. We've already had contractors and construction companies talk to us about how they can make use of that in their projects, such as putting it under footings instead of sand. So it'll decrease the weight, certainly, of what we ship off the island. Now the trick is to get people to get away from doing the commingled mixing of bottles with the other commingled stuff. Separate it, bring it in, put it in the right container, and then we can crush it. So that's exciting. So Pete, how about if I turn this back over to you and you can take the next step?
All right, let's see. We're at 30 minutes. I'm gonna blast through a PowerPoint, so bear with me for a second. And this is kind of just like where the garbage goes video, or not video, but PowerPoint. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. So where does the stuff go? We handle garbage, of course, or mixed solid waste, MSW, with technical term, and commingled recycling. We, even with all this separation we're talking about and heading towards, we'll probably always have some commingled recycling to manage, but the goal is to reduce that amount. And then we do have separated commodities. This, by the way, this slide shows 6 months old, so I tried to update it this morning. Maybe there are a couple things here that are not quite accurate, but it's pretty close. So separated commodities, we're already doing cardboard, aluminum, steel, motor oil, and other things. I have a full list at the end, but of course we're adding glass to that now. Just FY, if for your interest, 2020 in MSW volume, we did almost 5,000 tons of garbage. 2019, 5488. 2018, 5067, 2017, 5143 tons of garbage. So we're averaging about, I usually say we do 5,000 tons of garbage a year on Orcas. Interesting note on that, maybe Lopez does the entire year, Lopez does as much garbage as Orcas does in August for scale. Where's it go? And we're still talking garbage now. So all of our garbage, actually the entire county, well, no, not the entire county. Most of the county's garbage goes from Orcas to Roosevelt, Washington, which I visited. And it's actually a very nice landfill, as landfills go. It goes by rail. It goes south all the way really to the Columbia, directly south. And then it turns to the east and heads along the river and ends up right at the landfill. Okay, clarification, because I'm going to start talking about these boxes that are on site. So a 40-yard box is one of those on the back of the truck. And we have lots of those. And if you've dumped stuff at the Z-wall, those are the boxes you threw stuff into. And like it says, it's a 40-yard container. It's not 40 feet long. It's 40, it holds 40 yards of material. A 48-foot container. This is the giant garbage trailers you've seen on the ferry, maybe. Look like that. I didn't get a very good picture of it, but that's what it looks like. That's a 48-foot long container and holds 25 tons. So about once a day, we fill one of those 48-foot containers, 25 tons or so of garbage. Orcas Freight does all our trucking for us. Goes on the ferry, gets off the ferry. And then in Mount Vernon-ish area, actually right off Highway 20, kind of by Farm to Market Road. There is a railhead where those containers get put on the train and they go to Roosevelt. Switching to commingled. 2020, we did 823 tons of commingled. 2019, 739. 2018, 667. 2017, 730. So it bounces around, averaging 740 tons. It's interesting that we did 800 in 2020 when we had started separating cardboard, which is one of the biggest materials. So 2020, for whatever year, was a very big year for recycling. Obviously COVID has affected a lot of our business in the last couple of years, and definitely volume did not drop at all during COVID. So maybe because people were at home more, cooking more, they were creating more garbage at home. Not sure, but where does the commingled go? This is kind of new, and this is one of the things I couldn't fix, but this morning when I tried to fix it. But we were sending our recycling to an MRF, and that's a mixed recycling facility, which is a sorting facility. Basically, all of our recycling was going to waste management in Woodinville. In the last year or so, we switched to Recology, another recycling company and kind of more environmentally friendly company, and their facilities in South Seattle. So now this all goes down to South Seattle. How's it get there? So that's the smaller box, the 40-yard box on a chain truck. Those get dumped into a 48-foot container that we keep on site until it's full. And about once a month, this goes off. Goes on the ferry. Orcas Freight on the mainland drives it to the facility, which that I couldn't fix that graphic. It says Woodinville. It's really South Seattle. 2017, in the olden days, before China stopped taking our recycling, the country's recycling, we paid $0 to dispose of the commingled recycling. In fact, sometimes we got paid for it. Then China sword policy is what happened over there. They stopped taking American recycling. Prices have gone up ever since then. At the peak, we were paying over $200 a ton to get rid of the commingled recycling. That's more expensive by far than getting rid of garbage. So we were in a weird situation for a number of years where we were losing a lot of money on recycling, which is what in part has inspired going back to separation. More expensive to recycle than to throw it in the landfill. However, we didn't change our prices because we didn't want the public to start throwing everything in the garbage. So it's still less expensive to recycle at the transfer station on Orcas than it is to throw away garbage. So that's why we're gonna try to minimize commingled. Good first step was taking cardboard out, but again, that's unbaled cardboard, that's loose. So when we can take more of it and bale it, that'll get even more efficient. Okay, 40% of the cardboard was 266 tons in 2018. The other thing about separation that I didn't mention is that the amount of the material that actually gets recycled goes way up. When you mix everything together and commingled, maybe the industry says 75% of it gets recycled. I think that's optimistic because of contamination. I think more of it gets landfilled. But when you separate, like when you have bales of cardboard, those get like 99% recycled. And that goes for every material, aluminum, plastics, everything. If it's separated already and then baled, the percentage of the material that really gets recycled and not landfilled goes way up. So that's another cool thing about separation.
Hey, Pete, before you go on, let me interrupt. Are you going to talk about what contamination is of a mixture, a load of commingled?
Sure. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, but when we pulled a dead deer out of the recycling bin on the Z-Wall one time. Actually, that was when the county was visiting. County executives were visiting. There was a dead deer in the recycling. So that's a gross example. There's construction waste gets thrown in a lot. Food waste gets thrown in a lot. You name it, people throw it in the recycling. And
Plastic
that
sack.
plastic bags are now considered contamination because they gum up the systems at the MRF facilities, the sorting facility. So, but nationwide, contamination is a huge problem in the commingled stream. So, okay, I'm gonna just keep going. Where do these things go that we separate? Cardboard, aluminum, steel. They all go to Skagit Steel in Burlington, which is a nice short 41 miles away, including ferry trip. How does it get there? The 40-yard boxes are taken by Orcas Freight directly to Skagit. Excuse me. And as we were talking earlier on, that's about a $750 trip to us, and we may get $50 back. So we're not making money, but we're losing less money by doing this. There's some rough prices. Cardboard about $25 to $45 a ton. Aluminum $1,200 to $400. Aluminum's one of the most valuable, obviously, recyclables. Steel is semi-valuable also. Lowest prices in many years. This slide's a little old too because it kind of bottomed out in the last 6 months and prices are starting to go back up, which is nice for us. If we had a baler, we could quadruple our volumes. Talked about this already. Improve our carbon footprint. This is on the way. I mean, we're in the design phase of the building right now. Architecture is done actually, and so we're doing geotech and engineering on the site, the building site, and the roads around the building site. This is an old one. If we had a glass crusher, we could take another huge chunk out of the commingled, 20-30%, and would stay on the island. I did make this one. So that's a picture of our new glass crusher with a couple of our volunteers. Eric Morse is there. And this thing's up and running now. And we will be, like I said, accepting separated glass on November 1st. For those of you lucky enough to be watching this presentation, if you want to bring your glass in now, we will take it, and we will take it for free. It's going to be in the future $3 a can, half the price of recycling. We're also lowering the price of cardboard to $3 a can. So that's 50% less, 55% off the price of recycling currently. Other stuff we separate, appliances, those also go to Skagit Steel in Burlington. We are part of a state program for recycling electronics and fluorescent bulbs, and fourth one there, paint care. That's not it, it's paint care. That's a brand new state program that recycles latex and oil-based paints. If you were bringing us latex previously and were told you can't bring oil-based paints, that is not true anymore. You can bring oil-based paints. We recycle batteries, we recycle motor oil and antifreeze, we recycle cooking oil, we recycle tires. And green waste. And I put that in separately as a zero waste thing because, like glass now, it's a product that will never leave the island. So that's one of my favorite programs, because we will take in green waste and then we grind it up and we make mulch and we sell the mulch on island at very low cost. So that is the end of the slideshow.
Okay, so let me add a few things here. We've got about 3 minutes before we turn it over for Q&A. I was looking at a tax form that we have to file and was really pleased to see that our impact in the community for wages, we pay nearly $500,000 in wages over the course of the year. So it contributes to the community by doing that. Part of the billing for this presentation would be the future, and we've talked a little bit about that. Glass crusher was the future, but it is now reality, which is really cool. And the next thing is the baler complex that Pete talked about. and the capability that'll give us to bale multiple things. So what might be coming next? I can think of three things that we could say. One of them has to do with the baler. We don't know for sure. This might happen down the road that all those plastic sacks that people have been accumulating and have no place to take, it is feasible that we could do that sometime in the future, where we could bale plastic sacks, as long as there's a place that there's a market for that. Otherwise, they just go into the trash. Composting is something that we're interested in being involved in. We've talked to a lot of people about how what part we could play in composting. Composting tends to take a lot of space and a lot of heavy equipment unless you have it in a confined container of some sort. So we're not sure what that's going to look like, but there's a lot of interest and support in doing composting. And I would say the third thing I had in my mind is that when our building that the exchange is in was designed, it was designed so that the shed roof that's on it would be able to support solar panels. And we've looked into it a bit. We believe it's going to happen. We'll probably work with the county to try to get solar panels put on the roof of our building, which will generate certainly enough power for all of our needs, but then be able to contribute it back into the grid. And we think that when the county sees how well that works, that the next step would be that the landfill that's to the north of our operation currently, nothing's been able to be on it until I think it's been decommissioned, Pete. I'm not sure that's the right word for it, but and when that happens, some sort of a light application of industry could be on there. What better thing than solar panels? That much like what's on Decatur Island. You probably, if you've kept up with Opalco, they put in a solar field over there. So there's some exciting stuff coming up, and beyond that, I don't know what else I could say. You got anything else, Pete, for the future?
No, I don't. To me, the next problem for the island is composting, and we'll definitely be involved in that. I'm not sure in what way, but we will be hopefully at the center of the project, figuring out how to get that done, and not just on Orcas, but it's kind of a county-wide thing that's shaping up right now. It eventually will become an island by island thing, but the first steps are right now kind of happening at the county level. So.
Okay, it's pretty good timing. It's 1:15. So Jim, I'll turn it over to you if you want to open it for Q&A. We'd be happy.
Yes, this was really enlightening for me, because I didn't realize all the complexities of garbage.
Yeah, me too.
So I really learned a lot today. But yes, we have about 15 minutes left, and you want to give the floor to anybody that has any questions for Jim and Pete. And maybe George wants to start off and speak a little bit about some of the early years at the exchange. About a couple minutes, George, you want to do that?
Well, I would like to talk more about the old glass crusher, the problems that we had. So I'm concerned about what the new one is going to present, as far as there's a contamination factor with metal around the bottle caps and things. And that was an issue that clogged up the old machine a lot. The other thing that was a problem was getting the bottles into the machine with just jiggling them in with a backhoe was really inefficient. And we didn't have a cover over it. And so the weather got to it, and that was a problem. So whoever is in charge of the glass crusher, I'd like to know how you're going to get around the problems we had with the old ones, if you knew about them.
Yeah, I can take it. The question. Interestingly, the crusher is made by the same company as the original. There's a company called Andela out of upstate New York. The technology has improved, particularly on the contamination side. It's part of their there's a barrel. It hasn't changed that much, but it works better, I believe, than it did in the past. There's a barrel screen that the glass is kind of tumbling in, and when it gets small enough to be sand, it falls through the small hole. If it's bigger, it falls through another bigger hole and goes back on the conveyor and goes back in. It goes in a loop until all the glass is sand. So the old machine crushed it to one kind of like gravel size, I don't know, 1/4 inch pieces of glass, or even 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch. This just keeps circulating until it turns to sand. And while it's the stuff's in that barrel, screen barrel, all the contaminants, labels, plastic rings, metal rings, they float through the barrel, through the center of the barrel, because they're lighter weight than the glass, and it all dumps into a separate bin. So there's like, at the end of running a whole bunch of glass, and we're, like I said, we're still learning, and there's some finesse to running the machine. The trainer was explaining. Our first experiments were amazingly clean. The sand came out really incredibly clean. Is there a little bit of paper dust in there? Probably, yeah. But it's impressive. So I hope you guys will come and see that. The vibration part has definitely been fixed with technology, because there's an actual so there's a giant V-shaped, bin where you dump the bottles in the top. At the bottom, there's a moving mechanism that keeps the bottles from clogging at the bottom. So it keeps like moving them onto the conveyor. It works really well. And in terms of the material itself, as I recall the story, and I wasn't around back then, but the larger scale glass pieces, the idea was to use it as kind of a gravel replacement in septic fields, drain fields, stuff like that. And it turned out not to work there, because glass is smooth. It's not porous like rock and gravel. And so the microbes couldn't attach to it the way it can in gravel or sand. And so it was a fail in septic systems. They tried to put it in asphalt, I think I heard, but that also was unpopular or unsuccessful, some other reason. And so, as I understood it, basically they stopped crushing glass because they didn't have anywhere to get rid of it. I mean, when I first got here, there was huge piles of it down there. And I actually, you said you used it in a post hole the other day. I did a drain field all the way around my house with crushed glass, the old stuff. So it did have a use, but I don't think they tried very hard or couldn't find a way to get rid of that. The first thing we did when we thought about doing this again was how can we make sure we get rid of this stuff we grind up? And next door to us is Island Excavating. They import sand from the mainland. And when we looked at the volumes that they import or pay for, we can't even, if we could crush every bottle that comes to Orcas, we couldn't keep up with their need for sand. So we're like a drop in the bucket, and they're already excited about the material, and they just say they'll take all of it. So and as we ramp up, I mean, it's going to take a while till people learn to separate their glass. And so I don't think we'll even be close to meeting Island X Alone's need for sand for some time. In fact, we may find that we could bring glass from the other islands. And that's something we can talk about.
Sadie has a question. You're muted right now, Sadie, but if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also say that if 2 or more people are unmuted, it distorts the sound and gives a lot of feedback. So when you're not talking, it's a good idea to mute. I've been to a hell of a lot of Zoom meetings, so I know how it works. But that's not my question. My question, Pete, is, as you know, San Juan Sani and curbside garbage and recycling poses problems for apartment complexes, because we cannot get people not only to separate properly, but not contaminate everything. And then San Juan Sani ends up just throwing everything in the dump. So do you have any words of wisdom? I have offered through management to do whatever, go to doors with flyers, give, like little free things on what can be recycled and not with your brochure. And they don't take me up on it. Opal doesn't take me up on it. And I don't speak much Spanish, but I can kind of get it across to our Hispanic population. And I think once people understand and don't send their kids to the dumpster, we might have a better chance. But as long as we're using San Juan Sani, and not self-hauling, it's a problem here. So that's just my question and concern. Anything you can help with there, I would appreciate. Thanks. Now I got to find myself to mute.
Well, multifamily housing is a problem for the recycling industry generally. In fact, every garbage and recycling conference I've ever been to always has seminars on how to improve, the contamination levels in your apartment buildings. I mean, imagine living in, Seattle or Tacoma and collecting commingled recycling. It's a disaster. Which is why I don't believe stuff like 75% of the stuff gets actually recycled. I just don't buy it. So it's easier. We're in a small place. It's easier to manage that kind of stuff. Opal's been very open to every time we've talked to them about working with us. The collection thing is an issue because San Juan Sandy so far has shown no inclination to collect separated materials. Like they have no interest in, for them, they would need to buy new garbage trucks. They're ones that have different compartments on the all around the truck. So they would pick up your glass and then pick up your aluminum. They, as far as I know, they don't have any interest in getting into that. Which brings up the question, should the exchange get into trucking? And that's a big question. And I'm not sure what the answer is there, but you can still, I don't know what the rules are for Opal residents in multifamily. Like, can you opt out of San Juan sanitation and just self-haul? I don't know the answer to that question, but that would be one way, obviously, to just try to do it yourself correctly. And I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that. Brenda.
Sadie, don't mind that. That's my birth name. Well, that would be a handy little business for somebody, wouldn't it? If we had our glass containers and they were not contaminated. And also, I would like to ask you to speak about contaminated glass, what poses contamination, so that it's not useful to you guys to crush. But I don't have the answer, but I'm sure going to talk to Opal again and give that a try.
Okay.
And see if somebody's interested in either maybe hauling for us. They could make a little money. I don't know how that would work. Or we self-haul and make sure that people understand that's an option.
And it could be that San Juan sanitation, if they got enough people complaining about it, maybe they would consider investing in the equipment. I can't speak for them. Glass contamination, it just needs to be empty and pretty clean. But labels on are okay. Little plastic rings and little metal rings around the top are okay. We want you to throw the caps out in the garbage and corks out in the garbage. And rinsed out is great, but certainly empty. What would cause us problems is something half full of liquid, and then of course any material. The biggest problem with the glass crusher is when something non-glass gets into the stream. So somebody accidentally puts plastic soda bottles in their glass separation. But like I was telling George, it actually is pretty remarkable how well it will filter out small amounts of paper and metal and plastic.
Pete, can you put window glass in with that, or is it only bottle glass?
No, you can put window glass. You cannot put window glass in commingled recycling, because when glass is being melted back down into more glass, that messes it up, because window glass has a different melting point than bottle glass. But when we're just making sand, you can put window glass or even mirror glass with bottles and jars and make sand.
Go ahead. You got to unmute yourself, Mr. Gibbs.
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, what's Lopez doing right that we're not doing right yet?
Lopez, well, I mentioned earlier, and I'm not sure if you were on here, but one of the things they have going for them is their volume is like so much less than the volume we have in Orcas that it's easier to manage. They also, and for those of you who don't know, Lopez has a fantastic recycling separation program. They have an army of volunteers who are on site all the time. They and they do separate and bail. So one of the things Lopez has always had that we never had is a baler, which allows them to manage all those separated materials. Now we're finally going to get one of our own. So that is going to help us out. But since they've been baling and separating for so long, the public over there is trained. And we are in the process, and Duff, as our volunteer coordinator, is doing a really good job of getting the volunteers on the Z-Wall. Again, would love to have anybody here take a quick training and be a volunteer on the Z-Wall and help people separate properly, especially as we ramp this up. It's really, I think Lopez has two big things going for it. One is motivated population that is already trained and is used to separating, and they have really small volume compared to us.
Okay, no, I just wanted to add, other thing at Lopez is they don't recycle their glass. They have permission to put it in an old abandoned quarry or quarry that's no longer being used. And their answer to the glass is they run a grater over the top of it and throw some dirt down. So it's not a very efficient way. We're hoping, in fact, that maybe in the future, their glass would come to us so that we can grind it. Bruce has his hand up.
Hi, Bruce Orchid. I have a
No.
historical note, and George is probably the only one that remembers, but in '88, I was county commissioner, and we started something called the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. The first two members were George Post and Wally Lum, and I want to ask if they're still functioning and if they give the exchange advice as well as the county.
Yeah, I've been on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee since George asked me to be on that, like before the fire. I can't remember, but I'm the longest serving member of the SWAC actually. And SWACs are actually, I think, state mandated now for every county. And it's a pretty robust organization. There's 10 or 12 of us, including San Juan Sanitation and including Lautenbach and Lopez. Lautenbach runs the transfer station on San Juan Island. And people from the Lopez facility, as well as citizens and business members. And there's always a county council member. And right now it's Cindy from San Juan Island. Cindy, I forgot her last name all of a sudden. But yeah, pretty engaged. In fact, as I was mentioned briefly about composting, I think it's a county-wide thing first. SWAC's getting very involved in that because I get asked about composting more than any other question. And they're, why aren't you doing composting? And I say, well, because it's really complicated and expensive, but we want to do it, but it's just hard. So it's probably going to start out at a county-wide level with probably some studies funded by hopefully Department of Ecology, island by island studies. You have to see how much material is potentially there for composting. You have to figure out how you're going to mix rich material like food waste with, wood chips to get a good balance. There's soil science involved. There's heavy equipment involved. There's buildings involved, all of which is challenging. So it's not that people don't want to do it. It's just that it's complicated, but I'm off. So yes, there's a very robust SWAC. We've had, I think there might be an opening for an Orcas person on SWAC right now. So if anybody's interested in that.
Lynette had a question, and we'll take one more question and we'll take Lynette's.
Yeah, somebody several years ago came to the Deer Harbor potluck and gave a presentation. This was before you had added cardboard, and they were just about to add cardboard, separating out cardboard. And I remember thinking at the time, wait a minute, you've taken out aluminum, you've taken out cardboard, you're taking all the value out of the commingled recycling. But now I understand that commingled doesn't really have any value to begin with. And so it probably doesn't matter in the big picture of things. So I really appreciate the detail that you provided that helped me understand that. But that's not my question. My question is, why do you call it a Z-Wall?
Oh, Duff, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can feel that one. It's the construction of the concrete where the boxes are backed up into it. If you look at it from overhead, it looks like a Z or a lightning bolt. So I wanted to add one thing, if I may. When Pete talked about the composting, about 3 years ago, I think it was, we did a kind of a field trip to Lopez, and we got a chance to see how they do stuff. And they are amazing with their volunteers helping sort the recycling. But while we were there, we also toured Midnight Farms, which is the composting operation over there. And if you are on Lopez and has some time, you ought to go talk to Midnight Farms and ask them if you could get a tour. It's very impressive, and it's equipment, heavy equipment dependent. And it's kind of high tech where the air comes up underneath the composting pile and all that kind of stuff, but it has to get moved from place to place. But when you look at that, you can see what a big operation it really is. I guess there are other ways that are called windrow, where the stuff is spread on the ground, and then it gets turned, but that requires a lot of property to have a big operation. So it's not a simple solution. We did try to address it at the grassroots level. I think 2 years ago, we went around different places, Olga, Deer Harbor, and did a small presentation on how you can create a worm bin, for example, and you can do composting of your own stuff at home. And it was fairly well attended, but beyond that, I don't think much has happened of a bigger nature.
Okay, well, great. This was really an exciting hour. George, one more question and we'll field it. I know we're going a little bit past time, but
I just want to, I don't know if it's a question, well, it is eventually. The thing that I remember most about going to commingling was how people complained all the time about they'd been separating, and now they're being told, oh, just throw it all together. And it was a big public education problem there. And going back the other way, I suspect is going to have the same need for public education. So I just want to encourage you to have a very strong, robust education program that lets them know that there's a new system again, and it takes a long time to get that habit going, like Lopez has done. So are you planning a really big, hopefully, education program?
Pete, let me take part of it. That's a big part of why we have the docents, George, and so that we can do it on a one-to-one basis. But yeah, there's going to be information on our website that we put out press releases on a fairly regular basis. You're right. The trick is to get people to change over. It's surprising though, a lot of people are really comfortable with the idea of going back to separated. I think they see the fallacy of commingling, and that's why we were giving away these totes to help people separate glass. And I said, you remember what you used to do 20 years ago? We're just going back in that same direction.
Said, well, we're out of time now, but I'm glad everybody got a chance to ask their questions, and I want to thank Pete and Jim for a very enlightening hour-long presentation here. In order to continue all these kind of nice, great programs, we rely on generous support of our people here on the island, and put on chat a way to donate if you donate to the Orcas Island Senior Center. And I want to also encourage everybody that's on this call and spread it word to your friends that on Wednesday, November 17th, the Meeting of the Minds presenter will be Jay Kimball. Jay Kimball is the founder of 80/20 Vision. It's a consulting firm that helps organizations understand the global impacts and related environmental changes for emerging dialogue on climate change and its impact on San Juan Islands. Jay is an engineer who consults on mega trends of climate change and how to generate and use energy to reduce carbon emissions. Jay also works with Alpalco, which you had mentioned. So on long-range planning, clean energy grants, and member insight. Jay will provide an intriguing 20-year outlook on energy and climate impact on San Juan County and things we can do to adapt. Said to attend the events, go to the events calendar on Orcas Senior Center's website at orcaseniors.org on Wednesday, November 17th. To continue offering great programs like this one, we rely on your generous donation. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good afternoon. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.